Physician coaching saved my career. And when you think about medical education, it is scarcity from go. Each time the spots are less and less and you're competing for more and more. The physician personality is busyness is not the problem. Being busy isn't the problem, but we think it is because we're so unhappy. There is no better investment I've ever personally made, because otherwise I would be searching for a completely different career.
Welcome back to the Dr. Mo Show, Freedom to Shift, where we explore what it really takes to design life on your terms. I'm Dr. Mo. I am a physician, coach, creator of the Shift movement, because I don't believe that freedom comes from playing it safe. It comes from making choices. So each episode I talk with people who've done just that. They have shifted their work, health, or purpose and created lives that actually fit. So let's get started. Today we have an amazing guest that I have been so excited to get on this show, Michael Hersh, practicing physician and physician coach as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And I love that we met on Instagram and that our messages just aligned so well. And it's incredible. You know, social media sometimes doesn't feel all that social, but to actually make connections and actually create something quote unquote social from it, I think that's really neat. So it's so great to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. It's my honor for sure. And what you say about social media, it's kind of funny because in our world, social media is a tool. Actually, for my 11-year-old, I tell him you need to use social media, not let it use you. So every adult out there, reach into that inner 11-year-old and go grab that, because I use it to form relationships, to find people that I can relate to, that we're on the same page, we have similar goals. It allows me personally to create a world, it's a neighborhood for me. When we talk about, I wish my kids could just go out and play in the neighborhood, or why don't you have picnics with your neighbors? I'm like, well, my neighbors are across the world, so it's a little harder that way, but we do get on Zoom.
100%.
So just before we got on, and another podcast I heard with you, you were talking about physicians essentially breaking free and how you did it. Give us a little bit on your story, how breaking out of traditional medical practice, even just a bit, changed your life.
Yeah. So I had a very traditional medical career, straight through high school, college, medical school, residency, fellowship, hit the ground running in my attending career. I've been about 17 years out of fellowship training at this point, so I'm solidly in the mid-career phase of clinical medicine. I was probably burned out from the moment I started my attending job, right? So I probably got through fellowship, was burned out, and just was thinking, this is what good doctors do. Put your head down, keep going, build the practice. This is what you're supposed to do. And the interesting thing about burnout is it simmers quietly in the background, is typically kind of held down by that belief that, well, this is how everybody else does it. So you just need to power through and keep going. And that's exactly what I did. And I developed my practice very quickly. It got very busy very quickly. And then simultaneously, I was building a family. I got married. We have 2 children. And all of the pressure started to add up. You know, I started kind of the thing that so many physicians do, shaming myself with work-life balance, that I just wasn't getting it right and couldn't get it right. I dealt with medical malpractice lawsuit that kind of just made me so distrustful of clinical medicine and made it so hard to practice and go to work every day. And then COVID happened. And so it was all of these things from, essentially a life in medicine. And everything just felt so unsure and so unsafe. And that was around the time when I found physician coaching. And, even in 2025, I wouldn't say physician coaching, everybody knows about it, but it was even less well known 5 years ago. And most of the physician coaching programs that were out there were available for female physicians, but there wasn't really anything out there for men. And so there was a brand new program. It was a co-ed program, and I was not going to do it. And shout out to all the wives out there. It was my wife who was like, you have to do this. And it changed everything for me. And I'll just say that 5 years later, I'm married to the same woman. I have the same two kids. I live in the same house. I commute every day back and forth to the same job that I've been in for the last almost 17 years. And everything's different.
I love that because the geographic cure won't work. If you change jobs, I've had actually people say, well, why did you quit emergency medicine? Why didn't you, this was yesterday, why didn't you just change specialties? I'm like, I do not think you understand how this works. First of all, I don't want to change. I mean, I sort of did because my lifestyle medicine practice, but that's the culmination of 30 years of passion and things I'd love to do that I could never express in a traditional medical setting. So that's different. But they're like, why don't you just do family medicine? I'm like, I don't think you're getting what I'm saying. So it's when you say that everything's different, it's internal. It's all internal. And kudos to your wife. I loved that when I heard that in an interview. And then she's like, no, you are those people you're talking about.
Yes, yes. Because
I
that's
love
just
that.
it. When you're so close to it, it's so hard to see it. And again, you're in the grind, you're doing it day in and day out. And again, you just think, this is what I'm supposed to do. And sometimes it does take somebody outside of you to hold up a mirror and be like, actually, you can do things differently.
You know, for better, for worse, mine was actually my boss held up a mirror when I started really enjoying these other things I was doing. And I definitely want to hit on that next. But I started, my spirit changed when I started filling my soul with these other value-based things that I do with patients. It did not fit the mold. And I got pushed out of my job and pushed out of my role of 13 years a nocturnist in the same ER, a full-time nocturnist. That identity shift, the forced identity shift was not pretty. I lost half my hair. I got shingles because that's who I was. In that particular hospital, I knew the people, you know what it's like. I mean, that was my identity for 13 years. I was 15 years out of residency at that point. So we're about the same timeline, not the same age. I did not go right through. But in having those shifts happen for me, I realized in what you talked about in that interview that I had heard that I have a physician personality. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I mean, this runs so deep, right? I mean, physicians in general are selected for our drive and our determination. And like it or not, some of our perfectionism that is kind of embedded in how we just are. And it really does drive how we show up every single day. And what you and I were kind of talking about briefly offline is so many physicians are waiting for retirement to live the life that they think they were meant to live. And in that process, they're kind of running away from the busyness that is their current life. And the physician personality is, busyness is not the problem. We love being busy and productive and accomplishing things and doing things. It feels really good to us. It's everything else that ends up being it's the surrounding issues. So being busy isn't the problem, but we think it is because we're so unhappy. Sometimes it's just that the things that we're busy with are not really well aligned with the life that we want to be living. And so it's, how do I align this drive to be purposeful, productive, driven, hardworking with a life that I actually want to be?
I love that with the alignment. So if we're speaking to us from 8 years ago, before I started coaching physicians about 5 years ago, dabbling a little bit here and there, because like you said, there really wasn't anything there. And so you look at us, say 8 years ago, if you were talking to me 8 years ago, I'm laughing because I was totally not the same person. So many of us were not. And you were saying you can do something differently. My answer to you would be, well, what could I do? I'm a doctor. So how do you answer that question? What can you do differently?
I love this question.
Me too.
Because you're 100% right. There was no part of me that had any desire to be anything other than a clinically practicing physician. And if I'm being honest, even when I decided to quote unquote hang up a shingle and become a physician coach, there was still not an entrepreneurial bone in my body. I just saw a need that there were so few male physicians in this space. And thinking back to my medical school class, 50% of my classmates were men. And just realizing there needs to be more male physicians out there speaking to these issues. And until I allowed myself to even consider that there was a path outside of clinical medicine, of course it wasn't possible. Of course I couldn't think about it. Of course, if all I think I'm ever good for, quote unquote, is my work in clinical medicine, then that's all I'm ever going to do. And I think there's an important caveat here, which is that I still practice gastroenterology full time. I am still a full time clinically practicing gastroenterologist who has a coaching practice on the side, right? And so it doesn't mean giving up who you are. Sometimes it's just about allowing other things in that can really be so transformative. And in fact, allowing new things in is what has allowed me to continue practicing.
The fact that opening up your horizons allowed you to stay in that place that you love is, I'll never forget that when I was leaving the main ED, when I left, one of my colleagues said to me, I need you to remember, you are emergency medicine, but you are not only emergency medicine. And that was the most beautiful thing he could have said to me, because for so long, that was my identity. I mean, for so long. I mean, I was the kid who watched Trauma Life in the ER and was super excited. I mean, like this is who I was. And it still is. I still think that way. You know, I'm a worst case scenario gal by trade, you know, and which is also why it's helpful with remote practice, because it's like having a waiting room of 5,000 people. You tell me one chief complaint, I can see the serious ones from here. So it's fun for me. It's how do I fit that into this and make it flourish? Because you're right. It is just about, wow, there's a need there. How do we fill it? And I've had people tell me, physicians can't afford a coach. Give me your response to that one, because I know mine.
I kind of hinted at it before. Physician coaching saved my career. So prior to coaching, I was headed for the exits. I did not think that I had a long-term career in clinical medicine. And when I think about what physicians invest in, quote unquote, right? What do we spend our money on? Physician coaching for me has paid dividends far beyond my wildest dreams. I never could have imagined that fast forwarding 5 years, my plan was already to be retired from clinical medicine at this point when I first found physician coaching. I needed out. I wanted out. I couldn't escape fast enough. So when I think about physicians invest in this, do they have the resources to invest in it? I mean, for me, bar none, there is no better investment I've ever personally made, because otherwise I would be, like you were just talking about, searching for a completely different career. And how ineffective is that? So I think my personal opinion is every physician deserves a coach, because this career is so challenging and there are so many things that we are dealing with and managing. And the truth is, 90% of the stuff that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, we were not trained to process it or think about it or figure out how it weighs on us when we walk out of the doors of the clinic or the hospital or the OR. And so coaching has done all of those things for me. And again, that's what keeps me going.
And those are amazing dividends for your patients. I've had people come at me and say, you're trying to take people out of medicine. No, I want to keep people in medicine. If I can take a physician who is half out the door and tell them, look, let's decompress this a little bit. Because my goal was always to work 4 to 6 shifts indefinitely. That was my long-term, that was my plan. If I can keep you on the ground, the figurative you, for 10 more years. Look at those patients. Look at those lives you've affected, those lives you've saved. I feel like together we can save the profession. That's what I believe. Because I don't think it's coming from the top down.
And in a lot of ways, it's our duty, right? Like this was part of the Hippocratic Oath, was to protect this profession. And that is what I see as the duty as well. And, you know, when I go to clinic and when I am doing colonoscopies, I can help one person at a time. And each physician that I can help process their day and figure out how to deal with all of the day-to-day stresses, that is able to then show up to clinic the next day, I mean, the ripple effects of that are tremendous. Patients that are impacted by the ongoing care, huge. And we know there's a tremendous physician shortage. And we know that doctors need to keep practicing clinical medicine.
Yes.
And this can be an incredible tool.
I can't agree more. You know, I always say that, you know, if I save a life in a trauma, I get a mom home to hug her kid. Imagine if I can save the lives of 100 physicians, how many lives they save, how many more kids get hugs. That to me is giving back to the profession that gave so much to me. And like you said, that's my duty. That's a calling. Medicine has always been a calling for me. I had someone ask me yesterday, well, why don't you do emergency medicine full time anymore if that's your calling? I'm like, no, medicine is my calling. The profession is my calling. Being a doctor is my calling. And I think that means different things, and it can mean different things. And if you're talking to, so for example, in my practice, we do Wednesday night happy hour, which is with my lifestyle medicine patients. They come in, there's usually myself 99% of the time, and two or three other providers from my practice that we come in. You can come in once a week. It's like hanging around. We call it happy hour because that's what it's like. We talk, we chat, you have questions, and people say, well, it's not HIPAA compliant, because really there I'm a lifestyle coach. It's not HIPAA compliant, but I've got people sharing their stories on the internet to strangers, so I don't think they mind doing it in a safe space with 3 providers. Like, there are different ways you can make an impact. Even from the patient side, or, they're not patients at that point, they're more clients. But for each person that you keep on the ground in medicine, for example, like for shift, because you practice an office-based profession. For shift workers, people don't know when they come into the ER if it's that doc's first shift, if they work 2 shifts a month, or if they work 25. And I do have colleagues that work 25 days a month. Yeah, that's an entirely new episode. We'll have to do that one later. But when that patient sees the ER doc, for example, or an anesthesiologist, or someone or a hospitalist that's shift-based, they don't know how many shifts they're working. All they know is, I have a problem. How much energy and compassion and knowledge do you have to give to me today? So if you have 3 doctors that are taking the place of a full-time doc, absolutely it's more expensive for the company because they're with the malpractice. But if you can keep them on the ground for 10 years, to me, that's worth that investment. So what are your thoughts on that?
You've sold me.
Right.
I completely agree. I think what we're seeing, though, and you were kind of alluding to this, though, a lot of the saving ourselves has been placed on the physicians. A lot of physicians are waiting for somebody to come and save us. They're waiting for systems to change. They're waiting for insurance companies to change. They're waiting for something outside of ourselves to change. And if you are waiting for something else to change, you are going to be waiting a very long time, possibly an eternity, right? And so I think that is why this work has been so impactful and powerful to me, is because I too was waiting for something to change and just figured somebody has to see all of the suffering and just decide that they need to do things differently so I can feel better. And that didn't happen. And so the key here is, like, this work starts with us. And so how can you look? I mean, the truth is, I can't control every aspect of my day. There are things that happen on an everyday basis that I have zero control over. And that does not mean I don't have any control over my day. And so it is about figuring out, what can I control? What can I change? How can I do more of the things that I enjoy and less of the things that I don't? And when you can create your day starting from there and focusing on the things that you do have control over, really that's where everything shifts. And that's different for each one of us.
So what are some of the things, when you said that, I could picture my gut saying, like, if you slow down enough. I've actually told physicians, listen, if you don't want to look inside, don't quit working full time. Don't look. Because once you see, you can't unsee, and then you're really in trouble. Because once that door cracks open, you're kind of screwed, right? Like, you got to go through it. You can't. I mean, it's like it's a very good monster, but it's a monster pushing through that door, and once it's open, you're done. But I could feel in my gut when you were speaking of the things that weigh on you, and that took a lot of introspection for me. And I've spent literally decades in the self-help industry, the wellness industry. I started personal and professional wellness when I was 18. Who does that? I don't know. But it's who I've always been. So this is the culmination. This is the holy grail for me. But what you're talking, and I feel that in my gut. And I feel that, what are some of the things that came into your life, whether it was a circumstance or something that you felt in your gut of, this is something that has to go? What were some things you subtracted?
Yeah. There have been a few.
Well, everything except for the things that mattered,
Right.
right?
So one of the things, and I speak about this a lot because it's an example of how a very small change can have a huge impact. Was that in my fellowship training, we were trained to start doing procedures at 7:30 in the morning and to finish doing procedures at 5 p.m. There were no breaks. There was you could figure out if you could eat lunch, if you could free up enough time in your procedure day to sneak a meal, but otherwise you just kept working. And what I found is I became intolerable to work around because I was hungry and I needed a break. And of course, in my procedure room, every other person in that procedure room, the tech, the nurse, the anesthesiologist, everybody gets a break. So why don't I get a break? And I instituted a 30-minute lunch break in the middle of my day, or I started by asking for it. And I met a ton of resistance. No other doctors do this. Why do you need to do this? You're going to mess up the day. We have so many other things to coordinate and schedule around. Why does this need to happen? And I really leaned into like, I need a break. I need to eat. And I
I need to go to the bathroom. I mean, let's be serious. What other profession doesn't let you go to the bathroom?
Yeah. And there is not a single doctor out there that doesn't know the exact feeling of like being starving and needing to use the bathroom and being told that you just have to keep going, right? Like that is our training. And when I learned that I really could do this in my day, it shifted everything. Everybody is happier after I have had a break, right? It impacts the rest of the day for everybody in the room with me. And this is just an example of, was it easy? No. I had to deal with my own personal beliefs about what my day was supposed to be like and what a good doctor does and how a good doctor just works all day. I had to deal with pressure from the managers and the administrators about how that 30-minute block was going to impact my revenue generation. And then it all went fine. And it turned out it actually helped the GI lab because they were able to coordinate the breaks for the techs and the nurses more easily when there was 30 minutes that I wasn't doing procedures. And then guess what happened? Other doctors started adding a 30-minute lunch break, right? So we can also be an example of what's possible. We learned by example, but we can also be the example. And I think, as to what we were speaking to earlier, which is until you start to kind of throw off these beliefs about what you're supposed to be doing, it's hard to imagine what's possible.
You use the term I can't let go. What a good doctor does. That is, I was told, so in theory, these things sound fine, but once you start to bring it to the table and put it into the SOPs and the process, the system doesn't like it. The system does not like it. And, I was told it's just easier if you work full time. And I said, to who? Easier for who? And this was before I knew I had a widowmaker lesion sitting in there. I didn't know. If you had asked me, I wasn't burned out. I loved my job. I just didn't know. Everyone knows nights kills you. Like everybody knows. We all know this, but no, I'm different. I'm different. What a good doctor does is we work full time until we retire or die in trauma bay 3 of a heart attack. One of the two. And I used to joke about that. No longer is it a joke, but it's getting better, by the way. I'm doing the things now that I didn't know I had to do. And it's not familial, by the way. It is behavioral. And I earned that. I earned that. And if I can help, that's why I tell people, if you don't want to know, don't look. And I've actually had colleagues say, I'm not getting a scan. I don't want this. I don't want to know. Because that's not what a good doctor does. Because if you knew, you might have to stop working nights. But I love nights. Like this is my entire in my head conversation. I love nights. I don't work in the ER if I don't work nights. I am a night doc. Is who I am. It's who I've always been. It pushes my limits. It makes me be a better doctor. But I'm also a mom and a wife and a human being who needs to have lunch. So how do we meld that together? Because we have to generate revenue because we have to talk about money. I really think physicians need to learn to talk about money because our bosses are talking about it. And I no longer fit the mold in that system. Rightly so. I got kicked out for a damn good reason. I wanted to talk to patients. I wanted to work on the health of the group in ways that didn't fit the system. So when you go back to what a good doctor does, I was not that person. And I can own it now. But from your standpoint, being the example, holding your standard for things that are not outrageous. Like, guys, I just need to plan a bathroom break. Is that going to hurt anybody? And like you said, you're no longer hangry. We could probably change, we could upend the entire surgical profession that I love. What would they do if the ORs were a pleasant place to be? Now, I know plenty of surgeons who, I mean, they're my favorites. But when you think about the stereotypes, and we know that when we deal with behavioral concerns in physicians, for example, their souls are tired. Their bodies are tired. I'm not making excuses because there are certain things you should never do, but they're tired. We're very tired. And that's why we're all searching for the exit. But what if? Because that's relief. How long did you take in physician coaching? So like, how long did it take for you to see, holy shit, I'm different?
I would say it took 4 to 6 weeks before I was like, there's something here, which is
A
just
month.
like a second when you think about like the context of what my medical career had been. And yeah.
People will say, oh, I think I need another fellowship. You had a shift in 4 weeks. Imagine if someone came and said, Michael, I need help. I heard you on Dr. Mo's podcast. I need help. And you said, all right, let's do this. And they were invested. And I don't mean financially. I mean ready to go. Open, the door's cracked and they're like, nope, we're pulling this thing open. And they're ready to learn, ready to accept what you're saying, ready to see there is a different way to do things. Imagine 1 month. That's not another fellowship. It's not another certificate. It's not something you're hanging on the wall. It's not another letter after the end of your name. It's just everything's different. I don't see why it shouldn't be mandatory.
I agree. And for the physicians out there, to a couple of the points that you were just making. So, from most coaching experiences, there is a financial investment. And what I have found is that the financial investment supports the personal investment. When we get things for free, when I sign up for free things on the internet, maybe I look at it, but probably I'm not looking at it, right? And so the financial investment actually leads to the personal investment. When I'm invested in something, why I went head first into when I was in that initial physician coaching experience. And by the way, I still am a recipient of coaching. I am a coach and I receive coaching on a regular basis because brains are going to brain. And even though I can take a look from the outside for other people, it can still be relatively challenging for me to do this for myself. And so, but anyway, back to what I was saying, the reason I went so hard on my first physician coaching experience was because I was paying for it. And I was like, okay, if I'm delaying my retirement, which if you remember was the only thing that mattered to me at that point in time, then I need to take this really seriously. And so I studied it like I was studying a course. Mm-hmm. And that's probably, that's why it meant so much to me. And for a lot of coaching experiences, there is CME, right? And so in addition to that, you can actually get a certificate like you were just referencing.
Right. One more thing to put on the wall.
Exactly.
But no, I agree with that. There's the saying in the coaching community that people who don't pay attention. And we all know that. I mean, how many things have you said, oh, this sounds great. Here, let me DM you the keyword so I can get the template. I was thinking about this morning because I've got some good ones. And I'm like, I don't even know where they are because it was a free thing. Now, things that I've truly paid for, that were, like you said, a bit of a stretch. You're like, if I'm going to have to work even 3 months longer in this hellhole of a job, I'm getting something out of this. And it also, but it makes you coachable. And so I think this is a good point. If you are looking at physician coaching, I think the first question should be is, who are you coached by? To your coach. Because if you have a coach who's not being coached, there's no conduit expanding their knowledge to give to you. And I think that's the sign of any good coach has at least one coach behind them, probably more, because you hit that point where you're like, nope, I need a coach for this. I need a coach for this. I am really sucking over here. I need to do over there. And I think that's something to look at. And there are a fair amount of physician coaches out there, and I don't resonate with a lot of them, and that's okay. And that's why people in our space, I don't think any of us feel threatened by other physician coaches. And that was always an environment in traditional medicine where it was almost a zero-sum game, where it felt like if I took a patient, I took it away from someone else because it's the RVU pool, right? So you're taking away, but that's not the way this works. It's a very different place. So speak to that a little bit. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about medical education and medical training, it is scarcity from go. When I was applying to medical school in the late 90s, it was incredibly competitive, and you just knew you were, competing with all of these people for a finite number of spots. And then you get into medical school, and it's the same thing for residency, and then the same thing for fellowship. And each time the spots are less and less, and you're competing for more and more. And so it's so easy for us to get stuck in that scarcity mindset. And then you get out into practice, and you're right, you're fighting over RVUs and visits and all of these things. And I think what you're nodding to here is an abundance mindset, right? If I know that there's only one me speaking my message and my experience, it doesn't matter that somebody else is over there speaking their life's experience and their message, because people are going to hear those messages differently. There may be a ton of people who hear this and resonate with everything that I'm saying, and other people who just don't get me at all. And that's life. That is every experience I've ever had when I walk out my door in the morning and who I'm interacting with. And it's fine. And so it is. I think for me, the physician coach community has been such a breath of fresh air because it does feel so welcoming. And there have been very few experiences in my life that existed in that particular way before coaching.
Yeah, I don't know of any physician groups that don't focus on scarcity. I'm trying to think, as you're speaking, I'm trying to think about this, because certainly in school, right, there's X number of positions in residency, and that's just couples matching into that, by the way. We took 2 of 6 spots in our residency program, which to me, to this day, is like the most amazing thing, but again, we fought for it, and because it meant something. And this does too. And that I'm thinking about it. I'm even thinking of physician advocacy organizations, but it's still, who are we fighting instead of how are we growing? I don't want to fight anybody. I want to buck the system. Don't get me wrong. I want to do things a little differently, and not terribly differently. We still have to have a system that takes care of patients and pays the people who do. You just can't get around those basics. But I love being part of a profession in the physician coaching Venn diagram part of my profession. That is the part where we are all working toward similar goals. And the thing is too, especially because I've gone through business coaches over the years, you probably have seen this as well, that 3 years from now, your coach may not be the right coach for you. You've grown with them, and there's no animosity. It's just, this is good, awesome, moving on. And that's it, because that's how it's designed. Where you outgrow. So I just think it's a fantastic place to be. I'm very, very grateful. I'm just grateful. Just grateful that we're on the same page and that we can fight for something.
Yeah. And as you were speaking to, right, like the point is we can fight, but not with our colleagues, right? I mean, even in some of the large social media groups of physicians, they're so filled with scarcity. They're so filled with like doubt and skepticism and limiting beliefs. And it starts at the top of those groups, and it makes them so unpalatable. And you feel, for lack of a better term, just like ick, right? And so
I like that term. That's the medical term.
Yes, that's the very professional. And so, I love that, that there can be examples of what abundance looks like outside of those spaces, because I don't want to perpetuate kind of the old models. Here we are trying to, break free from these models. And sometimes our colleagues are actually keeping us in these models, right? So we don't want to fight with each other, but we do want to just demonstrate that there is another way of doing this. And not every physician who does the same thing as you is your competition. Like, we can all be in this together. Right? There's not just one place to go out and buy a hamburger, and yet they all still exist. So, how can we, right? How can we attract that for each other? Because it's
Yeah.
true.
And you know what? You might want a different hamburger on Tuesday. Guess what? You can go to a different place. So something you said really got me in that whole we're infighting essentially, and it's the crabs in the bucket. Because once somebody starts to climb out, they're like, that you can't do that. And they're just going to drag you right down. And sometimes those crabs are in your brain, not in your hair. That's gross. But sorry, that's the way my brain works. They think in pictures. But when it's an internal, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but when it's internal and you have a voice inside that says, I am not worth more than I get paid from Medicare, because sometimes that's what you're saying out loud in your brain. And you're saying, no, this is what I'm worth because you've been told that's what you're worth. This is how much value I can produce. Tell me, I need your opinion on that.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a big topic, right? Yes. And anytime we agree to do something, we are making a commentary on how others should see our worth and our value. And obviously health insurance and Medicare, these are huge topics. I think a smaller way of encapsulating this is how often we're asked to join a committee or go to a meeting and not get paid for it and not have our time valued. And sometimes those meetings are really near and dear to our hearts, and it's a passion project and it's something that we really want to do. But oftentimes we're being voluntold that this is what you need to be doing, right? I need you in this meeting. And we talked a little bit before about boundaries and how my life looks different now. Learning to say no to those quote unquote opportunities has really been super powerful for me. Even when I know I could bring value, even when I know it is something that I could be helpful if I were in the room, if it's not something that really resonates for me in that moment, if I don't have the time for it, and especially if I'm not going to be valued, my time is not going to be valued or compensated for, I feel a lot more comfortable saying no to those things now. And so just remember, when you say yes and you're willing to do things, you are telling people how to value you in that.
I feel that, unfortunately, personally, because I love my committees. I love what I do there. No, I don't love what I do there because I'm ineffective there. I'll be honest. It's a meeting, right? They make coffee mugs that say this meeting could have been an email for a reason. And that speaks to me. That every decision you make, and living with 100% intention is very tiring. So I don't think, that's a growth process, and the road gets narrower for sure. But at the beginning, like you said, it's maybe just saying no to that 30 minutes of no, I need time for myself to be valued. And that's radical ownership. That's radical ownership of this one precious life you've been given and the career that we are honored to serve. How can I be the best doctor I can be? And that's not always churning out one more patient.
And almost certainly never one more meeting.
Right? For damn sure. Really? I know, right? Like, could you come back with a revenue report? This would be hilarious. I'm going to do a revenue report on the number of meetings that I've gone to, and that this is what it tanked in my productivity. So I'm not coming anymore. And they could put it in dollar signs and they'd be like, peace out, go see patients. Right? But
100%.
Anyhow. Like I said, that's an entirely different ball of wax. That's a different, longer podcast. So on that note, I'd like to wrap this up, be respectful of listeners' time, your time, but it is very important for me that people are able to reach you. So where can they find you?
Yeah, well, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to chat with you. It's been such a great conversation. You can find me on my website, www.betterphysicianlife.com. Tons of free resources, blogs, a podcast that I did, all available there. I have this kind of free offer of helping physicians kind of figure out what's next in their career and their life, which I think is super valuable, and it's all there. And then my favorite social media platform is LinkedIn. So for doctors who don't think that other doctors are on LinkedIn, you are missing out. There's a whole bunch, and it's a super supportive community. So definitely check out LinkedIn. And then Instagram at Better Physician Life. I'd love for people to connect. And again, just thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for being here. So for the listeners, definitely look up Better Physician Life because you want one. So I love that. All right, guys, we will see you next episode. Have a great day and start living with a little bit of attention.